Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to today's webinar, DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap today, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. And we are going to be sending an email after today's webinar to give you guys a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. And we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. All right, with that, also at the end of today's webinar, sorry about that, we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is DevOps, Dependencies, and Safe, Unifying Value Streams to Accelerate Delivery. Good webinar today. Our speakers today are Helen Beal, who is she's a Ways of Working coach and also Chief Ambassador at DevOps Institute. Welcome, Helen. Thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me as always.
Great. And we also have Jeff Keyes, who is the VP of Product at Plutora. Jeff, thank you for joining me as well. Good to see you.
Well, thank you.
From you at least. All right, great. Well, Helen, I believe that you are going to be our chief presenter today. So I'm going to put myself on mute and let you get right to your presentation.
Thanks so much, Charlene. So let's talk about our flow today. Many of you on the call will probably recognize this. It's the improvement kata. The word kata, Japanese, comes from the word habit. So if any of you are martial artists and you've learned to practice your martial art in a dojo, you will have learned kata when you practice a move over and over and over again until it becomes natural muscle memory for you. So in the event of being in combat, should somebody try and attack you or punch you in the face, you can respond automatically. So it's all about practice in the context of DevOps, the improvement kata.
True that. You know, and what's funny about looking at this, Helen, every time I look at this, it's still funny. I still go, well, wait, why are the numbers backwards?
Let me explain how to read the improvement kata. So the improvement kata is a daily habit for practicing improvement in an organization. So the number 1 is over at the right, because the very first thing that you do is look at your long-term vision. So in the context of today's webinar, we're going to be talking first of all about bridging planning, execution, and improvement. Second thing you do in this particular improvement kata, where we're concentrating it around value stream management, is you look at your current value stream map. So we're going to look at systems thinking foundation in that context today. The third thing you do is think about your next target. And you can use your value stream map if you're practicing value stream thinking. So the third thing we're going to talk about today is operating and governing those value streams. And then our fourth part of our improvement kata is our PDCA, or our Deming cycle, which is our plan, do, check, act. This is where we experiment. So we're talking there about how to get from one state to another. So that's our flow today, Jeff.
That's perfect. And I love it.
Let's talk about bridging planning, execution, and improvement then to begin with. So Kent Beck, many of you will have heard Kent Beck, one of the original signers of the Agile Manifesto and author of the XP or Extreme Programming book series, said this, that any software planning technique must try to create visibility. Jeff, what does he mean?
Well, you know, the whole point of a planning technique has to show you where you're at and where you're going, give you some kind of idea of, can you actually get there? You need to be able to see the bridges across the rough terrain that you have. So that's why he's always been a proponent of milestones, things that are, you know, definition of done, what's it mean to finish. So you can look at all these different aspects of software delivery to understand, you know, is it achievable? Is this the right team? Can we actually do it in a repeatable manner?
And some of the things he's talking about here, like milestones and projects, are very much kind of where we were with Waterfall and where we were in the early Agile days. We're going to be talking about SAFe today. So tell us a little bit about SAFe, Jeff, from a very high level. Where's it come from?
Well, you know, in a tradition, you know, IT has always been such a big behemoth of a machine, and transforming what it's doing into more agile ways of working, where you can take work in smaller chunks, iterate on them, and deliver value in smaller increments, and overall deliver more quantity of value in that method, as well as being more responsive to customer needs. That's the ultimate goal. The SAFe framework is a fantastic start down that path because it provides some guardrails, if you will, to getting on that journey. It gives you some framework to utilize to transform a very top-down command and control kind of delivery where there's high levels of dependencies to try to get there.
But also on our screen, we have a little person that's looking down a very big crevasse, kind of mind the gap moment. We think there's a gap, don't we? Or we think there might be a number of gaps. At a high level, Jeff, why do we think there are some gaps, and where do we think they are?
Well, there's absolutely some gaps. You know, just because someone goes and gets certified as a SAFe, you know, pick your profile or title here, doesn't mean you're going to get there. And even if you follow SAFe to a T, it's, you know, there's still some intricacies of delivery that are hard. Things that aren't really called out well, like quality, that can cause unexpected delay. If timing's off, how do you reset across multiple trains? If you planned it, it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen on that velocity or delivery schedule. Just because you planned it doesn't mean it's actually happening. How do you actually know where it's at? There's a whole complete bit that we've not even talked about, which are the environments. You know, if I'm building something, what environment does stuff live on? You can't really see it. And this is exactly right. There's massive gaps between the planning, the execution, and a connection into a continuous improvement. And it just all happens. So, Helen, I mean, you talk about this all the time. Tell me what you see, what happens between planning, execution, and improvement in a SAFe world.
Well, SAFe's really strong on planning. We've got the idea of PI planning and the program increments. So it's really good at kind of that portfolio level, kind of setting the vision that we talked about and setting epics, and then helping people break down those things into smaller increments, like you said, user stories. But as you said, there is then a bit of a gap really between the execution. So we have our arts, we have our value streams, and they all get together for the planning, and then they go off and work. And one of the things SAFe kind of sets out to do is that high planning level is manage those dependencies between the parts of these very large complex organizations using the value stream and art profiles. But there seems to be a gap, as you said, where we're working away and one part of our value stream, so one of our arts or one of our teams within our arts encounters a problem in execution, and then something happens and it becomes quite difficult to kind of rejig everyone. They do have some methodologies in there, so very close to the DevOps automation part of our world. The CD pipeline is included in SAFe, and we have the decoupling of release and deploy, which is quite sensible as well, or should I say the decoupling of deploy and release. So a team would typically deploy, but they may not release until the whole release train, the whole art's ready. So there seems to be a gap there. Has that explained what you see in terms of the gap between those pieces?
Absolutely. Watching the progress of that delivery is really the interesting part. Seems like so much of SAFe focuses on the planning and how to get the planning together, that once you start talking about the execution and the feedback loop that needs to exist between what's happening in the execution to planning needs to be continuous, and that's part of the problem.
And then the next gap we're talking about is between the execution and improvement. So once we've gone live, how do we receive that feedback? How do we access the data that is telling us what the outcome is of what we've done, and how do we discipline ourselves in that improvement cart away? So what SAFe has around here is the continuous learning culture, but our feeling is that it doesn't really connect the dots enough. It's not enough, and it doesn't leverage the end-to-end DevOps toolchain sufficiently. It kind of stops at the end of CD. Is that your view on that as well? Would you like to expand on that?
Absolutely is the, I mean, absolutely is the point. So there's a lot of metrics that we need to look at, and you know, the SAFe does prescribe a ton of metrics, but from an improvement point of view, setting a target for your next state isn't really part of SAFe, and it's needed. Back to your improvement kata, to begin with the end in mind. If we want to move more towards DevOps and agile ways of working, and we want to break the dependencies, well, that needs to be the end goal. We need to set little mini goals along the way, whether that be improving our deployment frequency, improving our cycle time, our lead time. All those are kinds of metrics that we need to set OKRs on and measure them as we go, to see how we're doing. That's the point.
And it feels like when we think about it in that context, that SAFe gets us to a certain place, and it's certainly, you know, designed for enterprise organizations to get them lined up to be in a certain space, but to really take them to that full flow of work, that full flow of value realization, we need a full DevOps implementation across the board.
Right. Right. Well, and that's a good question, Helen. I mean, can you actually do DevOps and SAFe at the same time?
I believe you can, and I think many people do. And actually, I think what we've learned in previous webinars and out in the field, I did a webcast to a private client yesterday in the UK, a building society, and they mentioned PI planning, and I said to them, "Are you doing SAFe?" And they went, "Yeah, SAFe and less and DAD and this." We've got different teams all over the place. So I think this, I'm not sure if anyone's coined it yet, but I feel like coining hybrid agile. I'm sure somebody said it before, but I think a lot of people have got multiple agile frameworks in place, and there's a lot of places where they're doing agile and DevOps, and some organizations, I'm going to say, are really good at connecting them, because I think that's the right pattern, whereas in some organizations you'll have some teams focused on SAFe and other people driving DevOps across the business. That's my common experience.
Right. Well, so for those folks listening that are really familiar with SAFe, what are the key things that we need to do? What are the key goals that we need to do to get to DevOps? Is there any guidance that you would give folks?
For people that are doing SAFe to get to DevOps, I would focus on the culture and think about how to get people to adopt new ways of working. And I would put a stronger focus than SAFe has at its core on breaking dependencies over managing dependencies. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different practitioners. This becomes a little bit religious, doesn't it? And I think there was a really interesting actually conversation that went on with a DevOps Institute ambassador, Tracy Bannon, on LinkedIn the other day, and she was talking about how there seems to be a copycat mentality in DevOps. And I said, well, it's more that it's a practitioner-led movement where we share and learn from each other's experiences. So there is a temptation, I think, for people to replicate models that they see, and SAFe is a model that is increasingly proven in what is, let's face it, an emerging market. I would say it's not unfair to call agile at scale an emerging market still. And I think where DevOps for me is a little bit more flexible is that it's less prescriptive. It gives you, it's more about kind of trying to figure out what the goal is that you have and how you're going to gain value, and experimenting for an improvement rather than practicing a framework.
Yeah, well, and that's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, just to auger on that for a second, it's interesting that the goal of SAFe is managing the dependencies, but the goal of DevOps is breaking the dependencies. You mentioned culture. You know, the goal of SAFe is to transition to decentralized decision making and direction, and in DevOps, that's the foundation of it, and that's, I think, a lot of the culture that you talked about. Both, though, still look to provide transparency in an automatic kind of way.
They do. Definitely, and let's talk about transparency in the context of system thinking, which is of course one of the foundational pieces of both SAFe and DevOps. So you just talked about organizational design there, so we can see some of that on here if we look at the fourth piece in. So here we've got an example of tools of system thinking. So traditionally we're looking at a hierarchical organizational design, whereas as Jeff just said, we're looking in DevOps and SAFe and systems thinking, something that's more networky, more based around autonomous multifunctional teams, where decision making is decentralized or authority is distributed. Is there anything else on here that really stands out to you that we should talk about in terms of SAFe and DevOps?
Well, as I think of this, I really like the systems thinking, obviously, just because as it applies to DevOps, people go to just ask a simple DevOps question: what's your tool chain? Well, it depends, and it's so hard to look at any one tool and think of that tool as driving one complete aspect or another. The systems thinking approach of taking a view of the entirety and seeing how the whole thing changes as you adjust the bits and bobs of it is really key. Changing our thinking from it's just a simple process to no, there's feedback loops is foundational to what we have to do. You can't do that from a top-down approach. You can't do that from a heavy dependency. You need to start thinking about little autonomous bits. So changing the thinking from a traditional approach to a systems thinking will also be part of the journey into the DevOps world, and help manage those how you deal with dependencies.
And just to remind our audience, part one that we just completed was about our vision. So our vision to achieve that SAFe Base Camp and then our DevOps Summit. Now we're thinking about our current state. So this is a really useful tool for step 2 of your improvement charter to try and figure out where you are. Are you on the traditional part of system thinking, or are you moving towards the systems thinking where you are holistic and thinking of your organization as a whole, or even thinking of it in parts but not siloed parts, of value stream parts? And that's the other one I wanted to pick on really. It's like that silos versus whole. How do you see that in the context of value stream thinking?
Well, in terms of value stream thinking, you have to look at the whole. You have to look at the entirety of what's happening versus just little bits like what's happening. The foundation of DevOps is to combine development operations, and then as you do that more, well, you have to bring in your quality. Well, if you have to do that more, now you've got to bring in more of the planning, and what about the risk management, security, and all. Just even the organization of the team, you need to think as a little autonomous bit. On the next slide, I like how the next slide even aligns that even better. The goal when we're all done really is to enable small little teams that are completely autonomous, decentralized, and they're doing their own thing, maximizing their value. They're the closest to the problems that they're trying to solve, and they're the closest in the ability to solve those problems. They have the technology, they have everything they need. What we need to do is enable those teams and align these value streams so that they are completely independent. I remember going out on a visit to Amazon, and I was blown away at a description the development manager provided there of he talked about a single buy page on Amazon.com, describing the purchase site, and how a single page was made up of could be 100 different teams. You think of the catalog, the purchase, promotions, advertising that is brought in, the actual transact engine, credit card processing, you name it. And all of these different things are represented on a single page. And yet they're able to release independently, and how even for a company as large as Amazon with this number of developers was able to pull that off. That's not a pipe dream. It's not a fantasy. It's not oh, well, they can do it. This is the goal. And there's power in doing that, because the people that are closest to the problem will solve those problems with a overall vision of what's happening. And all of the things that we're talking about of aligning to value stream thinking help take us down this path, I think. I mean, you've seen this in action, Helen. You've consulted with a lot of companies. How have you seen the benefits of this working for people as they've gone more towards aligning to value stream thinking?
I want to do something different before I answer that question, which is just to comment on something you said, which kind of preempted another question that I had for you, which was, if we looked here and we talked about silos versus the whole, we might have people on the call thinking about how hard it is in an organization of a really big size to ever understand the whole. So my question really was about, how is a value stream different from creating another silo? And I think you really succinctly explained it, because the key to it all is autonomy. And when we have a value stream, we can create a separate string or chain within an organization, which means we don't need to understand the other 8,500 people or whoever is working in that organization, because what we've got is a discrete unit from idea to realization, where we can understand and link all the steps in it, which is different to what we've traditionally done, where we focused on having a mass group of developers or a mass group of testers, right?
Completely. And it is different in terms of organization, in terms of culture, going from top down to having a product-led organization, in terms of how we think about the process of delivery, how we do integrations. Yes, all these different things. And I love, Helen, when we talked about this value cycle, and I loved how you had put this together. This has been fantastic. There's so much here to look at refactoring, and SAFe takes us on this journey. But tell us about this value cycle, because I think this is brilliant. And even more so, just to throw another one in, hey, whenever we talk about DevOps, everybody uses the infinity loop. Why did you not use that here?
I was going to say that in my answer. So for many, many years, I worked with SDLCs in the old kind of language, and I stood up many years ago and did a presentation, and I was quite proud of myself, because I'd taken the SDLC and I'd color coded which bits were for dev and which bits were for ops. So I'd made it very clear where the delineation is and where we were trying to connect the two, where the gap was, where the wall of confusion was. And someone in the audience piped up, it's not very kind of DevOpsy, because it's so linear, it doesn't reflect the feedback that's needed. And as you rightly just identified, this was around the time also that the infinity loop was appearing. But I always had a problem when I was thinking about this and thinking about the infinity loop, with the fact that it's still separated dev and ops. So we still had dev on one side of the loop and ops on the other, and that just felt uncomfortable to me, because from an organizational model or design perspective, one of the things we were looking for was to just really fluff and blur the lines between a developer person and an operations firm person, not just the teams, but the people. So Gene Kim, I think, said it once on Twitter years ago, or it might have been Patrick Dubois, and I didn't take a screenshot, but there's basically this notion that one day everyone will be engineers. Now, we haven't got it in this presentation, but I did take a screenshot a couple of years ago of them saying the same thing. So it made no sense to me, the infinity loop, because it still showed this this separation. But what we did need to show was this stuff was going round and round as quick as we could around the same cycle. So starting with the idea of portfolio and backlog, doing some integrations, some testing, and then delivering that idea, and then getting that feedback that would then influence what goes into the portfolio and backlog next. So this is really the genesis of the value cycle as a continuous, and you can use it from both process or, in fact, I've got it next, I think. You can use it from a process point of view, as we have here, and you can also use it from a tool chain expression perspective. So what you're seeing here is the point tools across the categories that we had in the cycle before. And this is, it's really not uncommon, is it, Jeff, to have this number of tools, if not even more tools, let alone what a different team or different teams, different hundreds of teams across an organizations of thousands or tens of thousands of people would see. This is fairly complex architectures that we generally experience here.
Absolutely. Everybody wants their own, for whatever technology is being built and for whatever kinds of solutions, different kinds of toolings are needed. If I've got a Microsoft stack, I might have good needs for using more closely aligned tools to that. If I'm in all Amazon, maybe some of the AWS tooling makes better sense, and be able to mix in different levels of tools depending upon how secure does it need to be, how performant does it need to be. It just depends on what's being built, and trying to say one size fits all is really, really hard. But unless you do that, then how are you going to end up having some kind of standard of view and transparency in what's happening? Well, that's the point. This is all where value stream thinking comes in. Look at it from on a whole, standardize some of the metrics that come off of it, and integrate these things together. There's something we actually have, I wrote an article on, called the converged tool chain, that brings all these tools together, and it is part of the goal of DevOps is to converge the tool chain, make whatever's happening in the planning side show up all the way in the help desk side, so that there's a relationship between all these tools and that they correlate together.
Absolutely, we want transparency and visibility through that whole tool chain, and it's really hard for people to get that, I think. But let's move to a poll and come back to that thought. Charlene?
Yeah, so the poll has just been launched. It should be showing up on your screen now. The question is, how do you see what's going on in your continuous delivery pipeline? You can select from we don't, which is bad. We use Jira, value stream management, Excel, or other. Put your answer in the chat or in the question tab, whichever works best for you. Go ahead and make your selection. And while we are waiting for the audience to do that, just a gentle reminder that today's event is being recorded. So if you miss any or all of the webinar, you will have the chance to access it later. We will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand following today's webinar. So you will have the opportunity to watch it again if you want. All right, with that, we will go ahead. I'll give you guys about 10 more seconds to go ahead and get your answer in, and then I'll close the poll and we'll take a look at the results. All right. All right, guys, I'm closing it down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's take a look at the results. All right, looks like the majority of folks are using Jira to see what's going on in their continuous delivery pipeline. Value stream management's number 2, though. Yay! Yay!
Love it.
Did allow people to do multiple answers there as well. So what we can't tell from this poll is how many people said they were using both Jira and Excel, or both Jira and value stream management. But yeah, not an unexpected answer, Jeff.
Completely valid, and it's what I expect to see all the time. What's interesting is a fair number of people say I don't. Another set say, well, I see portions of it. I would expect that to be in the other. Like there's chunks of it I see. Value stream management, in terms of I see I've got it implemented so far, and so I see some good bits. What is fascinating to me, though, is the perception that if it's in Jira and my status says X, that, well, that's exactly what's going on. And there's some fallacies in that. It's good, don't get me wrong, it's good, but that's still the planning side. And some of the gaps that we've been talking about have been, well, how do I actually connect this to delivery? How do I see what environment's on? How do I see what my actual deployments look like? And a lot of that is just, it's missing from what is in Jira. Most people don't augment their statuses or have additional states so that you can actually get that kind of information.
All right, I'll go ahead and close out these poll results for you.
Thank you. Charlene, were there any comments in the chat about other things that people are using?
Let's see, I don't see anything in the chat, but let me see if there's anything. Okay, yeah, we have Argo CD,
okay,
and Tecton for CI.
Okay, so a couple of specific CI and CD tools there as well. Yeah, as Jeff said, that's what we're seeing, sort of what's going on in terms of whether things have been successful or not. But one of the questions really is, how fast are things going? What was the feedback? What was the what was the result when it went into live. So I think there's further people will go into that we'll come to. So let's have a look at this in step 3. So now we're thinking about the next target state. So this is thinking about where we might want to go. So we had a previous webinar just before Christmas, I think it was, which was 5 steps to set up value stream management and boost DevOps in 2021. And we came up with these 5 steps. Step 1 being find the value streams, then map them, then align the tool chains. Then we have extract the value stream insights, and then continue inspect and adapt. And what we've got on the right here is a safe development value stream canvas. So this is one of the assets that safe implementations use in order to do that step 1 and part of step 2. But Jeff, tell us more about step 3 and step 4 and step 5.
Well, that is the fun of it, right? So aligning your tool chain is bringing your tools together and connecting them, because you know, until you take, for example, everybody, the majority of the folks on this webinar said, hey, I track my value streams in Jira. Great, that's the first part. In order to actually see all the value streams, you've got to connect those, you know, your planning data to the rest of the delivery, to your CI, to your deployments, to your releases. And that's aligning your tool chain is exactly that. It's bringing the data together so that you can unify it in a single stream. After that, you can start to see the value stream and the insights from those value streams, meaning, hey, I can start to see the actual speed and bottlenecks of delivery. And I can start to understand where I need to make improvements. I can understand where I need to make automations or improve the quality or whatever the next problem is to solve. And that's the point of doing this whole process, is to help improve the delivery value. Well, once there, then you change the culture so that you always do it back to the value cycle. And the continually inspect and adapt is then, you know, every iteration to go through and to add more. One of my one book that I really enjoy is from Mick Kirsten on Project Product, and he brings up the topic of laying out your features, not only in a perspective of, if I have a release, that includes a set of features and defects, but I need to think about reducing risk and dealing with technical debt. And that's value. That's part of your inspect and adapt, and it should roll back into the things that you put into planning, and then now you're on the value cycle.
I think it's fair to say that Jira can't replicate or automate a representation of a value stream map with every step from idea to value realization.
That's absolutely right. That is absolutely right. I mean, you're going to get close, because the focus, and that's not Jira's goal. Jira's goal, or any kind of activity management, is to manage the activities, not map the process.
Absolutely. So let's think about this in the context of value streams. So in SAFE, this is the how they use it. So it's a primary construct for understanding, organizing, and delivering value. Long-lived series of steps used to create value, starting at the flow of value and some sort of monetization or value delivered at the end. I often describe a value stream as anything that delivers a product or a service, which I think is probably not so far off this. Do you have anything on there that you want to comment about? Perhaps the statement that it's about delivering value in SAFE.
Yeah, the whole thing that I would hope folks focus on is value stream is about delivering value. Who determines what is value? Is value the fact that we didn't blow up production? Is value the fact that we delivered, you know, bits into a particular environment? I think not. I think you have to take the perspective of, how does the customer perceive value? You know, I'm a product guy, and one of the questions that I get asked is, you know, show me what the customer will get on, you know, next month, because that's what value is. And so a value stream is the delivery, the set of events and the train, if you will, of getting that customer value, and how it will be visualized or monetized or delivered in the end. That's the point.
I think Elon Musk said something similar recently, in that not necessarily about business value, but let's talk about shareholder value, business value, and customer value. And he kind of said there's actually really very little point creating or trying to create direct value for the shareholders. The only thing you should focus on is creating value for the customer, because if you're doing that, everything else will come naturally. And the same as you kind of established there, I think, goes for business value. So we should always be focused on what the customer is experiencing and whether they're having a good time, because if they're not having a good time, everything else falls apart.
True.
So I think we covered this a bit earlier as well. It's kind of, for me, SAFE is really about managing dependencies, and mostly managing dependencies at the planning and portfolio levels, whereas DevOps is really focused on breaking dependencies. And I'm sure there'll be some SAFE practitioners out there that will argue with me about the enterprise architecture part of SAFE and things like that, but those seem to be kind of fundamental differences to me. And I think from my field experience, what I really observe is that most organisations are somewhere between trying to do those two things. They know they've got dependencies. Those dependencies have grown up for a couple of reasons. One is normally that the way that they've designed systems, not incorrectly, because that's just the way we did design systems, and the other because we put controls in place when things went wrong, and those controls that we put in place you could interpret now as bureaucracy. So we have weight, technical debt and cultural debt that people need to wade through in order to get to that state, that DevOps state we've talked about, where we have the kind of aha, kind of nirvana moment where everybody's beautifully autonomous and we're all doing lovely distributed authority, peer reviews and all that kind of things. Do you have any reflections on that as well, Jeff?
I do. You know, I remember the analogy that was drawn of the ultimate goal here is to create an environment where instead of managing every car on the highway, we want to focus on managing the highway and the guardrails and let people put whatever cars they want on that and get that value to the end. You know, the more we can get to having teams be autonomous and self-contained, the better. Can you imagine a world where developers care as much about making sure that the customer is happy and that they haven't blown up production as they are as just delivering code? That's, you know, how do you achieve that? Well, as what the beauty of DevOps takes the whole team and says, well, okay, you built it, you own it, you're gonna support it. So it makes people think differently when you have to make sure things go well. And as soon as who's building it is caring as much about the quality as you know, the QA team, if you will, things change, the perspective change. The best part about this, in my perspective, is the alignment to value, that everyone is aligned on delivering that customer value and doing it in the most efficient way possible.
And in terms of dependencies then, what does a dependency smell like? How do you know, or what kind of, what's the whiff of a dependency in an organization?
Well, that's a great question. What does a dependency smell like? Boy, there have been dependencies across differentiation of functionality, code dependencies. There's a mindset here of remembering who a customer is, even for a component. If for an internal team, for example, that builds a authentication or authorization kind of component that you would think of as a normal dependency, they have a mindset shift into being, well, that component has a customer. Their customer are other internal teams. That's okay. Delivering value means you'll always keep those available and you always make sure they work. Breaking dependencies in that world means that whatever you build will continue to work, and as you deliver new versions, they'll also continue to work, and you can continue to add more value without having the hard, you know, must deliver all at the same time kind of thinking.
Definitely. I also think it smells like a delay. It smells like there's a pause, something. It's like, if you see something going on that's making you stop, it screams dependency to me. Let's do another poll. Charlene, are you ready?
I am ready, and it should be on your screen now. The question is, of these problems, which is the most urgent to solve for you? You can choose from gap between planning and execution, gap between execution and improvement, getting feedback, ensuring compliance, or other. Please put your answer in the chat box or the question box. Go ahead and make your choice. And another quick reminder that knock on wood, we are going to have time for a question and answer period. So if you have a question for Jeff or Helen, Jeff is laughing because he never leaves me time for question and answer period. But that said, I'm an optimist, so I'm hoping that we will have time for at least 1 or 2 questions. If you do have a question, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. And hopefully we'll have, like I said, time for 1 or 2, maybe 3, we'll see. Okay, guys, I'm gonna give you about 10 more seconds to go ahead and make your choice, and then we will close out this poll, take a look at the results. Not as much activity with this polling question, unfortunately, but yeah, so we'll give you guys about I'll extend it another 10 seconds to see if I can get the laggards in, and then we'll close out the poll. All right, guys, 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. It's like a race against time now. All right, closing out the poll and sharing the results here of these problems. Which is the most urgent to solve for you? Looks like the gap between planning and execution is the top problem.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Yeah. This is the first time we've run a poll like this, so it's really interesting. But that is as anticipated. And then we've got getting feedback, and then we've got a tie between execution and improvement gap and ensuring compliance. Anything in the chat box?
Yeah, I'm looking here. It looks like a gap between strategy and realization. And and then making sure we have the right value streams with as little dependencies as possible.
That's a fascinating one. That's really great to hear that last one, actually, because it really shows that the market is understanding value stream management practices and the importance of breaking dependencies. Jeff, any comments from you?
Well, these problems are the reason. This is the why for value stream management. If these are important to you, this is the reason why to look at value stream management, because that's what it solves. So help me with the connecting planning and execution, help me with having a method for feedback and improvement, and ensure governance. That's it.
Yeah, and for me, connecting strategy to realization, for me, it goes strategy, planning, execution, improvement, realization, or maybe realization, improvement. That's the end to end.
Exactly.
All right, I'll go ahead and hide these results so you guys can get back to your conversation.
Where were we? We were here. Right, let's talk about step 4 in our improvement charter then, which is our PDCA. Experimenting, getting from one state or another. So just a reminder, we're going from here to here. What sort of things can we do to get from one state to another? You there, Jeff? No,
sorry, I'm having some audio problems. I think I'm back.
Yeah.
You bet. Well, I think starting with the goal of understanding that, if you take nothing else away, recognize that safe is not the end, it's the journey. And it's going to help us in this journey to start changing our culture. But there's a lot that we need to look at as we reorganize and restructure everything. And it's going to involve from how we do changes to our release processes. Even think of the organization of the team. Who's driving the features? And you'll say, oh, I've got product owners to do that. No, who's responsible? Like if the quality's bad, who's responsible? Who's responsible for making sure that they're the right features are delivered, that they're the right quality, that they're usable, that it's the right customer, that customers appreciate and are delighted by those features. And if the answer is not the team, and you can mention everybody on the team, then it's not headed in the right direction. That's the start. From there, you have to start bringing in everybody else that's going to care. How do I ensure compliance in this? How do I ensure security in this? the organization, my team has to change from being handoffs to being, oh, it's a complete team. I really like this. You've always talked about this, Helen, of having a lightweight service management that is related to this. Give me, what do you see here? Tell us, why does this fit?
Well, there's two sides of the house here, aren't there? There's the dev side and the ops side, and Agile was primarily concerned initially with the dev side, and we had DevOps because the ops side didn't really kind of get Agile. And part of the reason it's been quite difficult to scale Agile and expand Agile across an enterprise and across very large enterprises is because we hit blockers, and a lot of those blockers or inhibitors come in the form of dependencies, and a lot of those dependencies, we've created systems around them to manage them. So things like cabs and release management and things like that are purposefully designed to help us manage complex dependencies across complex amounts of teams. So it's not an easy job for anybody to unpick all of that. And I think it's always really important to put that sentiment in front of people when we're talking about new ways of working, in that people shouldn't feel that they've been doing it all wrong all this time and that they're idiots and how do we get ourselves into the state. It's a practical reality of the improvement approaches that we had in the past was to do this, but there are ways forward. And what we're seeing here is a bit more of the improvement charter. So again, you're seeing the long-term vision, the current condition, and then the next target condition. But the point I think we're making is that the way to get to the next target condition is to do what we said. So to do the set the long-term vision, then understand the current condition by using things like system syncing and value stream mapping, and then working together as a value stream. So as you said, all of the people now understand the system and the step and get together and agree the experiments that can take us to that next target condition. So this brings us here, I think. I just want to go, so let's go here. So let's talk about the planning and execution improvement governance gaps and how VSM bridges those gaps, and then we'll go to our final poll for the day.
Absolutely. These are the core gaps to go solve that everybody's been, mentioning. That's what we talked about in the poll. There's these key gaps of understanding how to connect planning to the rest of delivery. That's the key. Everybody's got planning. I'm sure everyone has planning. How to connect that to the execution, that's where the nuggets lie. How do I connect this into my CI tools? How do I connect this into my release automation? What do I do if there's heavy approvals in that process? How do I connect this into the environments? What do I do for a go live state? And that execution is significant. It's not simple. And really all this has to be done in a heterogeneous world because the tool chains are diverse. And you can't come out and mandate and decide that every team's going to do it the same with the exact same tool chain. That's a non-starter. It doesn't work. And meanwhile, you've got to incorporate a decentralized way of thinking about not only improvement, but a governance and compliance. You still have to answer the questions for HIPAA, for insert favorite regulatory compliance here that folks deal with, and you still have to answer those same questions. It doesn't mean though that it has to be managed by a central team. It does not mean though that you have to produce something from a single team that is auditing each individual team. It can be produced and handed up in a standardized fashion. In fact, the goal is to shift all this left, to incorporate improvement and governance into the process, build quality in, build compliance in, build a method that improvement is automatically and naturally collected. That's our goal. And we need to bridge these gaps in using however method we're using, especially in SAFe.
So let's do our final poll for today.
All right, guys, it's on your screen. The question is, what is the biggest inhibitor to delivering value faster for your team? You can choose from don't know how to start, don't have leadership support, managing dependencies, no visibility, or other? Go ahead and put your answer actually in the questions tab. That's the best way to get it to me quickly. And we'll take a look at everybody's responses in a few seconds. But before we do that, just a final quick reminder that we are doing a drawing at the end of the webinar today for four $25 Amazon gift cards. I almost shortchanged you guys. So stick around. We will be doing that drawing at the end of the webinar. So you got to be in it to win it. So stick around. Okay, guys, let's see. We're doing much better on this particular poll response. So we'll give you guys about 10 more seconds, and then we'll close out the poll and take a look at those results.
Did we wake everyone?
Yeah, right. Okay, all right. We're going to close out the polling question now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, it's closed, and here are the results. Managing dependencies seems to be the biggest inhibitor to delivering value faster for their teams. That's kind of doesn't surprise me. I don't know what you guys think about these results.
Yeah, I don't think that was a leading question. I think it's a fair answer, but it's certainly not an unexpected answer as well. It's great to know that people don't know how to start, so that's good. People aren't getting stuck there. Also good to know that people aren't lacking leadership support, because that's a really tough one to resolve. Managing dependencies, though, Jeff, we can do a lot with that, can't we?
That's why we're here. You know,
Yes.
and is to say, if managing dependencies is the problem, value streams is the answer.
Absolutely. So let's just get back here and let's talk about how Plutora brings it all together, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about this for a second, I'll spend no more than just a couple minutes, but as you look at the core challenges of value stream management, there's 4. And I know this is a similar diagram to what we showed before, but think about it. First, the challenge that you have without it is you can't see what's happening along an individual application delivery pipeline. We were just talking about, well, gosh, I can see what's happening at the planning level, but what happens everywhere else? How well am I doing at compliance? How well am I doing at quality? How do I bring all that together for a single pipeline? And you have fragmented visibility. You can't see it. Well, if you can't see what's happening at a single pipeline, good luck at seeing what's happening at a portfolio level, including the dependencies. And these dependencies aren't just the hard code dependencies, but there's functionality dependencies. And then, kind of building on that is that process of seeing what's happening has to be done for disparate methodologies and disparate and distinct tools. Got to have a way to normalize all that. And bringing that in means if you can't measure it, well, you're certainly not having any methodology for continuous improvement. So what do we do about that? What does Platora take? From a value stream management perspective, we're going to help you bring these silos, these independent pipelines into a way that you have automatic visibility and transparency into every pipeline, so that you can model your pipelines as value streams, add the governance, add the milestones, the phases and gates, so that you can understand the KPIs, how you're tracking toward it. You can have a natural and automatic improvement, and you can actually see the work in progress and see what's going on to understand the bottlenecks. So what is Platora, and what is it that we do? On the next slide.
Sorry, there you go.
No worries. So Plutora is a cloud-based platform, and this is what we do. We integrate to the tool chain. We normalize and converge the tool chain. So we'll bring data across the whole suite from planning all the way into production and bring them together, correlating data that's happening in planning, correlate that to your CI tools in the whole building process, incorporate all the quality and defects and build kind of metrics together, so you can look at the quality, look at the artifacts that are delivering through the solution, and compare that, and also correlate that to what's happening on the environment. So you can watch the builds, like I have a feature, what environment does it live on? We do that. That's exactly what we do, and we do it all in the cloud. Now we've added on top of that integration a set of management and orchestration practices. So there's a whole release management practice so that you can, in essence, provide governance to every pipeline so that they can do it themselves. You create a template, individual teams create a new release, they can then get whatever governance they need off it, and off they go. You can do the same for the environments. What a simple solution. Ask yourself, where are you at managing pre-production environments? If you're still on spreadsheet, the business case for managing your environments in a cloud-based solution is massive. It is probably the easiest and simplest improvement you can make to your development pipelines. And then a solution for managing your go live and deployments for go live weekend and standardizing it so that you can look at areas to automate, standardize, and improve. Now, all of this is feeding into a data warehouse, a data lake, and providing deep analytics and comparative metrics, giving you insights in what's happening. You're able to collaborate on this with really transparency that is automatic for every pipeline. As teams become more autonomous, you have to have some tooling to see what's going on. Otherwise, you'll create a new problem, which is, I don't know what anybody's doing. Hey, that's great. I know what I'm doing. I don't need to know. But at a management level, you still need the higher level. And by default, you need some way to still produce that standardized audit and governance for compliance issues. That's what we do. So if you find yourself on this journey, we can help you. Go ahead, Helen. This is a cool white paper.
There is a white paper coming very soon. So this is about everything that we've talked about today, really, but about how to bridge these gaps, so how to use SAFe with value stream management, how to bridge those gaps and get yourself up to that DevOps summit and get rid of those dependencies, break those dependencies, and connect planning, execution, and improvement. Coming soon.
Sweet.
Holy smokes, you mean we actually have time for questions in today's
4 minutes.
webinar?
4 minutes.
We have 3 actually, because I need to do the drawing at the end, but let's go ahead and dive right in. Here's one for you guys. How do you define value? Do you hold to Tom Gilb's views on stakeholders and insist on requirements or user stories that have value metrics built in? I have done a ton of talks on this, and I absolutely agree that value should be written into the user stories. And I've come up with, perhaps, Charlene, we can provide some materials post-webinar to that person or to all the respondents, referring them to some of my previous talks on this very topic. But it does depend from organisation to organisation and team to team. And there's some very simple ones that we can do based on sort of P&L at a team level. Then we can do things like basket size, customer journey. We can get into AI ops and start thinking about session length and bounce rates and all sorts of, there's a huge variation on them. But the one thing I will say is what I said earlier, which is I believe that value should always be measured from the customer perspective, not the business perspective, definitely not the shareholder perspective. But if you can make your customer happy, everything else falls into place.
Mm-hmm. That is the truth.
All right, great. Well, we are 2 minutes to the top of the hour. Unfortunately, we are not going to have any time for any more questions, but we do have more questions in our questions tab. So anybody who did not get their question answered, we will definitely be sending the questions over to the folks at Platora, so you will definitely get your question answered. And as Helen said, we'll also be more than happy to follow up with you guys with, and all of the conference or the webinar attendees with resources that Helen is going to provide on this particular topic. So good stuff all the way around. Thanks for everybody who did submit questions, and please, like I said, please know your question will be answered. I apologize that we weren't able to get to it on the webinar here. Also, a quick reminder that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the webinar, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. We will be sending out an email later on today that has a link to access this webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars, look at the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you.
All right, real quick before we close things out, we did the drawing for the 4 Amazon gift card winners, and our winners today are Stuart A, Cynthia C, Juan A, and Janet C. Congratulations to all 4 of you, and we'll be following up with you via email to get your gift card over to you. So please check your inbox, and if you don't see it there, please check your spam folder. Helen and Jeff, as always, thanks for a great presentation. Lots of good information on there, lots of interactivity. So thanks again. Always appreciate your expertise and your insights.
Always
Thank you.
a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.